Hi everyone, good evening from India and good morning to you.
Good morning. Good evening. Hi.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning, Emily.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
How are you?
Yeah, good. It is 5:30 in the morning here. Well, almost 5:30 in the morning.
Hi everyone, Keshav this side from Delhi. Great to connect with
Hey.
you. Great to see you, Emily, Simone. My love always to you. And Therese, if am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you
Okay,
so much. Nice
Therese,
to meet you all.
thank you. It's a real privilege that you're joining us today, and I just wanted to inform you that I will, if in case you want me to help with the presentation, I can share the screen when you begin speaking, and then you can just give me a verbal cue every time to change slide, and that's as much as that's it. That's to it.
That's
So
perfect.
yeah, thank you.
Just let me know when to start, and I'll be ready to go.
Right. I think the moderators will be once we will be beginning sharp at 5 Indian time. So in case any of you want to grab coffee, please feel free to do so. You can keep it on the screen. We are okay with that, and that's all okay. And I was telling Emily also the other day on our conversation, so she already has one with her. So Therese, if you want to get one for yourself, you can please feel free.
Oh,
Okay,
I
yeah.
have it.
So just
Yeah.
be comfortable is one thing that is important for us, and for us that conversational reflective element where we can have a dialogue per se, like talking to each other, is something that we have seen work very nicely. And Simone, if you want to say anything, Therese, if you have any questions, Jasmine, Mahima are our wonderful team, and Mihika is also here. They have all been to the dialogues, been very responsible for its success. So then I will stop talking and I will be only sharing screen as the moderator, and you will tell me now.
Perfect. Thank you. Emily, I'm glad I'm not the only one using headphones. My daughter is homesick and she's playing Animal Crossing in the background, so I thought I would just keep it all a little quieter for you all. That's we stayed over at a friend's house last night, so I am borrowing their headphones so that they only hear my side of the conversation at least at 5:30 in the morning, rather than everyone's side of the conversation at 5:30 in the morning. So great. But they tend not to be very comfortable, so I may get some of my own. Nice. I always find my ears get a little hot. Oh, that makes sense. I'll let you know by the end of this presentation how they are. Yeah. Brand recommendation. Which one is it? I don't know. Mine are the ones that ITU issued with my laptop, so probably nice. the ones that are UN standard. They don't have little hidden translators, though. That would be super cool if they did. But ah, man, wouldn't that? Mm-hmm. I would feel like we were in Star Trek if that was the case. Yeah. Is this your presentation? It is. Nice. Hopefully it's not too much. I'll try to stick to the time limit. Honor the rest of the presenters for sure. I like it.
Therese, it looks like a very wonderful presentation. So it reminds me of one of the projects because I've been working in the rural development space, especially with women and young girls. And this is one sector which we've been trying to train girls, but sometimes the patriarchal mindset is so strong in the areas we work in that they do not associate tech with women,
Exactly.
especially they have their stereotypical notions associated with the technological industry, and I mean all kinds of wrong notions, you can say. um, so it used to be so much of a challenging project to get girls forward even for training, because the parents used to think, okay, once the training is done, then obviously the next step would be placement would mean in some high profile office. And it took us so much of time to make them understand that technology is not something that will corrupt a woman. There are many other reasons why a person can be corrupted. So because when you're touching a computer, it doesn't shoo away saying, oh, you're a woman, let's go away, or it's just the men's domain. So I think it's a wonderful presentation that you've prepared, something that we really look forward to.
Well, good. I think, you know, this is an interesting thing that our partnership has discovered, that all over the world, the problems are different. You know, it really is critical to do a regional, and at best, and even better, a local approach to this problem. Because, you know, in some places, one of our partners found, and they announced recently that they found that the mobile phones that they had given to teenage girls to try to develop an entrepreneurial group, many of them had given the phones to their boyfriends. And you know, it's not an anticipated problem, but it was a local cultural norm that, as you say, technology was just not something for these girls. It was not seen as something they should have. So there's lots of interesting things to find out about this rural development space, for sure.
And you know, Therese, it's very interesting what you're saying, because I have literally just got off a Asian Development Bank consultation where we're discussing this youth economic empowerment pivot that has to be achieved like as a COVID response. And this issue of localization and really understanding the local context and having it bottom top sort of an understanding of contexts, especially moving forward, was something that I also broadly understood was a feel that many people had, because we were all entrepreneurs, policy people, and but one thing I saw there, when the youth tag came as a reflection, then somewhere the gender thing got lost. Like very, very weird, like strange thing that I saw, that all of a sudden, when youth advocacy began with men and women both, boys and girls both, somewhere that got lost. And that was my strongest learning or a reflection today of the whole process, where the moment I actually joined here on your call with everyone else, I was like, wait, but within the youth, we have nobody mentioned women, or that
Wow.
one issue about sustainable tourism when youth advocacy was talked about. So just a reflection I'm sharing with you of what I saw. It doesn't have a judgment already, right, towards anything or anybody, but as what I observed, including my own self, like because 50 people when they're consulting and 49 are talking about youth and not women inside of youth or girls inside of youth in that domain. When the context is entirely different, enablers are entirely different, amplifiers are entirely different for both the genders, or even the third ones, fourth ones. So just yeah, what do you think? What has your experience been on these spaces?
Yeah, that's a really common and accurate observation we've seen, for sure. Suddenly, when people start talking about youth, maybe their perceptions shift away from, you know, depending on the topic, away from young women. It's a fascinating thing. ITU has a great program called Girls in ICT, and it's growing all the time. And each year it gets better to bring to kind of try to break that mindset of the fact that girls feel like, oh, technology careers and even learning about technology is not something for girls. It's a boys thing. So it's an interesting problem, and we will need to solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all need your guidance and everyone, all stakeholder support. Emily also had a very interesting thing to tell me the other day. She said that when we are doing, and sorry, Emily, if this takes away from your speech, but this is your words, I'm
No.
crediting you for it preemptively also. She told me that when we try to drive these facts in non-fiction, there's an intellectual resistance people have. But Emily told me, and it was so profoundly, it has stayed with me since that time, that when you make a story out of it as a fiction, then people don't resist and they absorb a lot more. And it was such a deep insight. Emily, thanks for giving that to me, and just something I thought I should share with you too.
Pleasure.
That's a really cool observation. As a science fiction fan, I totally, I can see it.
Yeah, definitely. It's, and I mean, like, it's most prevalent. You see it in science fiction and in fantasy, but you even see it in a lot of just fiction in general, right?
Yeah.
People can deal with some very hard topics, and in a lot of cases, people will actually sit down and they'll properly read through something rather than I actually, like, it doesn't even need to be in those kind of hard areas. I was reading the genre, they call it as chick lit, so it's like comedic, but centers around women in like a career sense and then a romantic sense. And so in this particular novel, it had, you know, boy meets girl, but girl is essentially trying for one of the top spots in a like a Hollywood agency for talent, and she's competing against a whole bunch of guys. And so it actually dove really deeply into the type of shit that she has to deal with in comparison to the type of shit that her male colleagues have to deal with. And even though she's the better person and she works longer and she works harder and she gets more deals and those deals are worth more, she has to deal with a whole bunch of extra things. And so I found it really interesting that they would dive that deeply into it, and at the same time, you know, also into your, you know, romance and all of those kind of things that you expect in that kind of book. But I came out the other end being really pumped about breaking down a whole bunch of barriers, which I think is like wonderful, right? Even though that's my natural inclination anyway, I think to myself, you know, the number of women who would read this whose natural inclination it isn't, who might be able to see into that a little bit better. And those are in genres that people consider silly, but they still carry that weight to them.
Cool.
I think it's also more about the perception, because I'm currently based in Ireland, and I've seen that if you reach out to girls who are in transition year or girls who are like 15 to 16-year-olds, they are very flexible in terms of their mindset. So you can just tell them that, oh, this is this cool thing which happens with tech, or, you know, this is a microbit and you can program it and you can actually see the LEDs on it and you can make games out of it. So they get very curious and they want to learn more about it. So I think it's more about tapping the right age and telling them that you can do this and it doesn't need to be perfect, because I've seen that girls are perfectionists and they want everything to be right, everything. And when things don't work, when you have an error in your code or when you have bugs, they just feel very, they don't want to work on it. So they just feel that maybe it's their own fault and that's why it's not working. And that is a huge problem when it comes to tech and when it comes to women in tech. So I think that is one of the pain points when it comes to women in tech. And if we're able to solve that, then we would be able to diversify the field more. And I've seen myself, like when I was in first year, there were only 10 girls in our class out of 150 people. So now the ratio has increased and now there are like 40 girls in the class as compared to 10 girls. So I think it is increasing. It's just maybe because of these initiatives and programs, we are able to reach the right age and create the difference that way.
Have you found, this was something that I came across, I can't remember where, maybe an article or someone told me or whatnot, but they were saying that particularly in Western cultures, that girls do a lot better in same-sex schools than boys, because in co-ed schools, there's a point at which girls think that being smart makes them look undesirable towards boys, and so they stop trying. Is that something that you have noticed?
Actually, the thing is that I did my schooling in India, and I went to an all-girls school for my high school. So I was always surrounded with girls who were very competitive, and they were always, very academic. They just kind of, they were really, really academic. I felt that I was very average at that point, because I thought that I wasn't trying enough, or I wasn't working hard enough. And I always had that in mind. But when I came here, I realized that I am actually working as hard as I can, and I have this pool of opportunities in front of me, and I was just underestimating myself. So I think that can be something which if influences the mindset, of course. But personally, I think I just felt more like I had to always try harder, because I was always in this pool of people who were performing really well. And I didn't understand my value at all, because I felt that I was one of the sheep, or one of the many people who were trying for the same thing. But I think that can be one of the major factors which influences girls' mindsets, because I've also been to schools here in Ireland which are all girls schools. And there are co-ed schools as well, and I have seen a difference between how girls think, how they approach tech, how they approach different new technologies like microbits or robotics. They are very different. So some of them are very curious. They would want to kind of like just get their hands dirty, just experiment with things, make things, build games. But some of them would be like, if they're working in pairs with a guy, they would just want the guy to do everything. So there is also a possibility that can influence the mindset of people. So yeah, there are so many things when it comes to tech. But coming from an all-girls school in India now to literally a male-dominated area, I didn't feel that much of a difference, but more difference was in terms of the competition, because I've seen that Ireland is a bit more slow and relaxed as compared to India. India is very competitive. Everybody just wants to kind of like, work hard and excel. But in Ireland, it's a bit more slow and relaxed. So that was one of the things which I noticed in terms of the environment. But definitely in Western areas, the technology sector is more male dominated as compared to India. I think in India, it's still females are there in computer science courses. But over here, I've seen that females are there in more mechanical engineering courses. And that is something very, very different, because in India, that will not happen, In mechanical engineering, you won't see any females.
I hate to interrupt you, but we're gonna have a lot of time for all of these discussions. We have some panelists that have to leave a bit early, so I'm gonna start the session right now. Thank you all for joining, and my apologies for arriving a bit late as well. So good morning to all of you, and thanks for taking the time out of your day, and especially for those of you joining from the US on a holiday to join us for this very open dialogue, allowing for global voices to be heard. How fortuitous that we are meeting today. It's Labor Day in the US, right? This symbolically highlights the issues that women face in the informal sector, such as inequity in pay and being underpaid for positions that men perform as well. So thank you all for being here. So at the Aspire Artemis Foundation, when it comes to development and advancement of women and girls, we believe that a support system is necessary. In terms of our outreach activities, skill building, capacity development, and preparing the younger generation for their future in the workplace, we believe that you need to employ an approach we uniquely termed EMI. And this means that supplementary education, coupled with organized mentorship and training and internship experiences, will enhance the traditional educational experience and help young people, especially women and girls, shape their own paths for their future, enabling them to re-enter or enter the workforce productively. The Aspire Artemis Foundation is pleased to be part of this open discussion. Our foundation is committed to improving the lives of women and girls, with focus on those who come from vulnerable and disadvantaged backgrounds through early interventions, education, information sharing, research, and training by using innovative means and working to create an understanding in an inclusive environment. We work in the United States and across the world. The activities of the foundation strive to bridge the gaps between theory, policy, and practice. In all of this foundation's work, the focus is on our mission, which is empowering women and girls to be independent, self-sufficient contributors to society. The activities of the foundation strive then to allow an enabling environment for young people and women to thrive. We are in a moment of opportunity where we can all take decisive and coordinated action to support women, to enable them to enter and remain in the workforce. We should be leaders in creating a more equitable workplace and creating more equitable opportunities for women and girls. And as I've said in previous dialogues, lack of access to education, employment, and even the global stream of knowledge available on the internet impedes progress and growth for some of the world's most vulnerable and disadvantaged people, especially women and girls. But access to education and employment is not enough. It is also important to recognize that even when women achieve their goals, especially in fields such as STEM that aren't traditionally available to women, our efforts, they also need to address the reasons why women leave those careers. Women don't only need access, they need support, financial, technical, social, and emotional. When it comes to access to the internet, we know that the technology can act as an equalizer. But if sufficient investment is made to scale up the necessary infrastructure, however, simply enabling access, it's rarely enough. Women and girls have to get the support and investments in the security and the accessibility. Another problem for women, particularly in developing countries, is the protection of their intellectual property rights. They often feel that they do not have the resources to protect their inventions and ideas by means of copyright, trademark, or patent, especially as they may have ownership concerns that a supervisor, mentor, or someone else will use their ideas without crediting them as founders because they lack the marketing team and resources necessary for self-starting and self-advocacy. This is particularly true in developing countries across the globe. Whilst organizations like ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, help entrepreneurs in copywriting, trademarking, and registering their entities through enabling the infrastructural system, more needs to be done. We must work together to change the workplace. In too many places and in too many ways, structural inequality has inhibited the professional growth and advancement of women. The current system of work often ignores the life cycle of women by not recognizing the realities of childbirth or providing opportunities to re-enter the workforce after they start their families. Some women who choose to spend time at home with their children during the first 2 most formative years of a child's growth find when they re-enter the workforce, they are often penalized and have to recommence from a lower level and may be unable to advance in their careers. The situation differs in individual countries, but in many societies, families or communities' attitudes towards women working outside the home may not be viewed as acceptable. The perception of a woman's role then shapes her family's decision as to whether she should be allowed to work. Even in developed nations, although women may be just as capable and qualified as men, they are sometimes relegated to roles deemed appropriate for them and are not promoted to higher echelon positions. For example, representation in C-suite remains highly unequal. Women entrepreneurs still have unequal access to venture capitalist funding, which lies below 2.2%. The challenges women face in the workforce are numerous. According to McKinsey report in 2019 on women in the workforce, for every 100 men promoted and hired to manager, only 72 women are promoted and hired. This broken rung, as they term it, results in more women getting stuck at the entry level and fewer women becoming managers. Not surprisingly, men end up holding 62% of manager positions, while women hold just 38%. The report goes on to say, this early inequality has a long-term impact on the talent pipeline. Since men significantly outnumber women at the manager level, there are significantly fewer women to hire or promote to senior managers. The number of women decreases at every subsequent level. So even as hiring and promotion rates improve for women at senior levels, women as a whole can never catch up. They are simply too few women to advance. Labor force participation is another issue compounding growth in the workplace for women. When women do have the opportunity to enter the workforce, often they are paid less than men for performing the same work. Women's labor force participation in general is lower than that of men. Prior to the COVID-19 virus, according to a report from Catalyst in 2019, less than 47.7% of all women participated in the labor force, a decrease from 50.9% in the 1990s. According to the United States Department of Labor, in the report this year on women in the workforce, there has been an uptick in participation of women, but those occupations lay in order of rank: domestic and personal service, teachers, stenographers and typewriters, clerks, farm laborers, laundresses, saleswomen, bookkeepers and cashiers, cooks, and farmers or general farm work. Think about it. The statistics show that the economy is filled with women in service sectors, but not equally distributed in the higher paid services, such as politics, STEM, finance, and other high-skilled professions. We have seen an increase in this over the years. But we see that though there is an increased participation in the workforce, this story is not the same when you add in industry or other factors such as race or caste, for example. Vulnerable populations of women, such as women of color, migrant workers, differently abled women, including women at risk for family retribution, are also a particular concern when it comes to workforce participation. Even when women do attain managerial roles, there is no support system that they are retained and remain in those positions. In economically underdeveloped countries, women's status in society is even worse than that of Western developed societies. Their only importance may be perceived as laying only in their reproductive abilities and homemaking. And they are often not given the opportunity to work outside of the home. There are statistics of women who are unable to take on positions or roles for financial reasons, often entailing sacrificing their safety. Due to lack of educational, economic, and work opportunities, women and girls often become victims of trafficking, for example, by the promise of employment, and are lured into forced labor or sex work, often with the involvement of highly organized crime networks. As UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, points out, the lack of specific legislation on trafficking in persons and or the inadequacy of an existing anti-trafficking legislation has been identified as one of the major obstacles to combating trafficking effectively. We find that economic or home life situation could make women vulnerable to be drawn into dangerous situations from which it is difficult for them to extricate themselves from. They may think that they are going into the workforce to contribute substantively. In Nigeria, for example, as Jo Goody writes in her article on sex trafficking, seemingly legitimate offers of employment in affluent countries attract women with the promise of being able to make sums of money that far exceed what they might earn at home. Forced labor and trafficking in women violates the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, which guarantees the right to life, freedom from torture, freedom from slavery, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. These rights cannot be derogated, even in terms of war and national emergencies. The reality is that in many societies, these are seen as women's problems and women's issues and are not taken seriously. The situation of women globally needs to be remedied. We need to concentrate on preparing women and girls for a digital future. This requires the necessary investment because many won't be able to operate or function if they are unable to work in a technological environment. That's just the reality. It is good to write reports, have dialogues, and bring people together, but what can be done now to internalize and execute? Funding and training the use of the infrastructure to support a digital workplace is necessary. In countries that have been heavily dependent on technology, as we've seen because of the COVID-19 virus and other viruses and threats like these, investments need to be made to increase communications capabilities in order to attract high-value tourism where connectivity is vital. In terms of retention, there are cases where companies have talent within their organizations that have worked hard and are not being promoted. In conclusion, women and girls should be assured access to education, continued learning and training to enable them to perform relevant skills to enter, re-enter, and maintain their place in the current and changing workforce. And this needs to be followed by support. And let us not forget the legion of older women who are often cast aside for reasons that have more to do with perception than reality. There should be recognition that these older generations have much to contribute, as experience cannot be discounted. It goes beyond mere mentoring, although that is one aspect of a larger question of women in the workplace. We need to work on enacting legislation and reforming discriminatory laws to ensure equal pay for women. We need to work on reforming equal pay, as well as paying women once those laws actually are enacted, paying women the same as men for the same work, time, and effort. We also need to work on enacting or reforming laws on maternity leave, hiring and promoting more women in highly skilled positions as they become and are qualified for them. Where training is required, ensure that equal access to training is given. Ensuring that there is no discrimination based on gender, race, intersectionality, sexual preference, religion, ethnicity, and other differences, not only as prescribed by laws, but also by ensuring and enforcing an appropriate environment and work policies. There are organizations that have been established to enable the advancement of women to top echelons and provide opportunities to network for advancement, but often these organizations are seen as elitist or cliquish and do not welcome outsiders. This reinforces a cycle that does not allow others to thrive. These are all steps that need to be taken, and we need to collectively drive the political and societal will to ensure that this results in action. I look forward to an interesting and intriguing and enlightening discussion as today's session unfolds. So this session will be moderated by Mihika Iyer. She's a rising senior at Walton Hills Regional High School in New Jersey. She has spoken at Grace Hopper and TEDx, among many other feats. So I'll leave it off to Mihika to introduce our keynote speaker and take over the discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
So hi everyone, for me to introduce me, I'm Mihika. I'm a rising senior and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. So up next, we have our keynote speaker. Therese Littleton is a communications professional at the Equals Hub, which is the global partnership for gender equality in the digital age, and is based out of the United Nations International Telecommunications Union, or the ITU. Thank you so much for being here, Therese. We are excited to see your keynote.
Thank you very much, Mihika. It's such an honor to be here with you all today. And as Mihika said, I'm with the Equals Global Partnership. The rest of our very long name of our organization is the Global Partnership for Gender Equality in the Digital Age. And what we do from our headquarters in ITU in Geneva, Switzerland here, is we organize a group of more than 100 organizations who have committed themselves to addressing some of the same problems we just heard about, with a special emphasis on the digital aspects of the future, whether it's the workforce or our social lives, our family lives. Every aspect of our lives will be touched now or eventually by digital technology. So we feel it's extremely important to address the massive gaps that exist and persist in the digital world insofar as gender. There are other gaps as well, and they're quite intersectional, as you know, and so we'll address some of that. So with no further ado, I'll get started on this presentation and hopefully not take up too much time, because I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So as I said, today I'll be introducing or speaking to technology as a driver of women's economic opportunity. Women in the workforce, we believe in Equals, cannot be separated anymore from digital technology. Next slide, please. So how does gender digital inequality affect employment? Well, in many ways. First of all, it's obvious that the majority of future jobs will require at least basic digital skills, and this includes jobs that have heretofore not had a digital aspect to them. Part of this is due to the pandemic at the moment, but part of it is due just to a changing world that emphasizes digital life more than it ever has before. Still, approximately 3.6 billion people are offline, no access to the internet, and the majority of those are girls and women. This gap is not shrinking, it is widening, and it is at its worst in the least developed countries in the world. So there's a huge economic impact of this to women and girls in least developed countries. They're being left out of modern digital life entirely. To make this worse, a gender gap in mobile technology ownership and usage persists around the world. Even in places where there is significant mobile technology, great internet access, and people can use smartphones to do things like banking, or even non-smartphones, even flip phones, to do things like banking or text messaging, emailing. Women are left out of this. They don't get to own or use devices for a host of different reasons that we talked about a little bit already. Women are underrepresented in tech jobs, as we've just heard, globally. And at the same time, digital technologies are becoming more and more important to our societies, our economies, and even our values, no matter where we live in the world. Multiple barriers are the cause of all this. There's as many barriers as there are women, probably. And as we discussed before the call started, some of this is quite local or quite regional or even cultural. There's lack of affordable access to infrastructure. There's lack of digital skills. There's online safety concerns for women and girls. There's poverty. There's gender discrimination, stereotypes, cultural norms that don't allow women to even think of technology as a part of their lives. And then there's a lack of visible role models. If there aren't women in technology jobs, imagine, and you've all seen, there's a huge lack of women in technology leadership. Next slide, please. COVID-19 is making things worse. The pandemic is highlighting this gender gap and the gender digital divide everywhere, because many people have had to get online more often and more persistently than they ever have had before. So without access to the internet, kids can't go to school in some places of the world, or in some places in the United States, everywhere. Girls and women are missing out on the tech-enabled measures that are coming and that are starting now to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic. Because if they don't have access to tech, they can't enjoy these benefits. Many jobs, for example mine, have shifted to remote online work. And the gender gap in access and skills to technology will result in women not being able to find or maintain this type of employment that we don't know how long it will last. Maybe this is the new normal. If it is, we need to make sure that women and girls can access it. Next slide, please. So I work for the Equals Global Partnership, and I work specifically for the Hub, which is the secretariat or sort of headquarters of the Equals Partnership hosted at ITU in Geneva. And we are a partnership of more than 100 organizations from a bunch of different sectors, including private industry, governments, civil society, nonprofits, research organizations. And we're trying to mobilize a movement for change to get some solutions that can work for women and girls worldwide, but also be able to scale from big to small and back again, so that we can help address Sustainable Development Goal number 5, gender equality. Next slide, please. How does Equals work? Well, gender digital equality is our goal. And we have divided ourselves into 4 coalitions. And this kind of helps us address all the many facets of this very big and very critical problem. The first is improving internet access for women. I'll talk a bit more about each of these coalitions in a minute. The goal is to reduce the gender gap in internet access by 50% by the year 2030. We don't think we can eliminate it entirely, but we feel that would be a significant achievement for women and girls around the world. Next, building women's skills. Once you have access to the internet, if you don't know how to use a device, or you don't know how to have a job, you know, writing basic code or anything else, you still can't enjoy the full benefits of digital society. So our goal there is to ensure that 60% of women and girls have achieved at least a minimum level of proficiency in sustainable digital skills by 2030. Leadership. This is where we get at employment in the tech sector, and also jobs as bosses and managers in tech. And our goal is to have 30% of leadership be women by the year 2030. And finally, underlying all of this work is our research coalition. We feel that it's critical that our stakeholders have the information from evidence-based research with gender disaggregated data to support all the decisions that they make. Next slide, please. So first, diving a little bit into our internet access coalition. Again, our goal is to reduce the gender gap in internet access for women and girls by 50% by the year 2030. So the aspects of this are many, and this is led by GSMA, a mobile technology group that some of you may have heard of. We want to make it more affordable for women to access and use the internet, make everybody aware of and comfortable with the benefits of women and girls going online. We need to make sure that people support this idea everywhere. Improve the accessibility of the internet for women, address safety, security, and harassment concerns, develop internet content that is relevant for women so that the internet is a welcoming and safe space for everyone. And finally, providing women and girls with the confidence and know-how they need to get online. And we give you a little case study there on the side of this slide. I won't get into this now. If you want more information, you can always visit our website, which is equals.org. Next slide, please. Building digital skills is a critical part of getting women into the digital workforce. We want to ensure that 60% of women and girls have achieved at least a minimum level of proficiency by 2025. So this is ICT, which is internet, or I can't think of the word now, internet communication technology skills. We want to make sure that girls achieve a minimum level of proficiency in these skills, that they get access to education and training, that they become digital citizens and creators. So not just getting a job as a coder. We see the value in participating in digital society more widely. Being a creative presence in the online world is absolutely important for girls and women as well. And finally, changing the mindsets of men and women about what is women's role and potentials in ICT. This is really, really important. And the leader of this coalition for us is DQ, the Digital Intelligence Quotient Group. Next slide, please. Our leadership coalition wants to ensure that 30% of tech leaders are women by the year 2030. This obviously involves changing the mindsets again about what can the role of women be in ICT and business. And this gets at some of the things that we've heard about already. What about maternity leave? What about some of the women's issues like childcare and things like that that supposedly get in the way of women's leadership? Well, our coalition is working on all these things in an intersectional way. What does work-life balance and women's safety and security in the digital workplace mean? How can we ensure that tech companies implement internal policies to employ and promote women? And how can we make sure that ICT entrepreneurs who are women receive the support and the money they need to thrive and get their companies successful? And finally, making sure that everybody has the same kinds of trainings and education opportunities to use ICTs to improve their competitiveness in the digital landscape. Our fearless leaders in this coalition are the International Trade Center here in Geneva. Next slide, please. Our research coalition is led by Oslo Metropolitan University. And again, we see this as extremely important that all of our work and our decisions in the Equals Partnership about getting women involved and thriving in the digital world is supported by research. We want to identify and fill key knowledge and evidence gaps, and there are a lot of them when it comes to the internet. As we were talking about before the call, a lot of early research in internet access has simply ignored gender. And so one of the biggest challenges for our research organizations is to try to thread out gender disaggregated data so that we can actually find out if, for example, 42% of people have access in such and such country, how many of those are women? So that's an important task for our research group, and they've taken it on enthusiastically. We want to conduct research on strategically selected high impact topics so we can maximize our impact. And we want to provide practitioners with actionable guidelines and recommendations, things they can actually do to help fix this problem. And finally, of course, we want to facilitate collaboration. We're the UN, that's kind of what we do. I forgot to say Georgia Tech is also co-leader of this group. Next slide, please. So far, for Equals, we can say that in this progressively technology-saturated professional environment, we've started our work towards getting women the necessary educational opportunities, skills, and motivations that they need to participate. Through Equals, over 52,000 women and girls have gotten skills training and mentoring. We've had 146 research projects, and our Access Coalition is working every day to make sure that people have mobile coverage, devices, and everything they need to actually find the internet in their lives, and also other digital technologies. So the goal remains to equip girls and women with the digital skills needed in the labor market. You can't have a tech job if you don't have tech skills. It's just that simple. But as I said before, not just as employees, but also as creators and successful entrepreneurs. It's really important. And also as leaders, CEOs. Social innovations have the potential to change our lives in every possible way. And to make sure that everyone can enjoy this, we need to provide opportunities for every marginalized group in an intersectional way to make sure that we focus on bringing equality to the digital future. Next slide, please. I wanted to give one example before I finish up. Every year we give the Equal in Tech Awards, and we give these awards to initiatives from around the world in 5 categories for any work to bridge the gender digital divide. And this can be quite small, a project with 10 young women or something, or it can be quite big, a big UN style innovation. And throughout the years, we've done this since 2016. Before that, it was the GemTech Awards, I think, since 2013. The winners have provided amazing examples, so inspiring, of innovative solutions and practices to ensure that we can close this gender digital divide. I wanted to highlight last year's winner of the Leadership in Tech category, SheWorks. They won in this category for their SheWorks Academy, which connects women with training opportunities. And there were over 200 initiatives nominated in this category, and we felt the panel of judges felt that the SheWorks Academy was really effective and efficient at addressing some of these questions that I've talked about quite directly in markets where women are excluded from access to technology and from jobs in technology. Next slide. And I just want to thank everyone for your attention and time, and just for being interested in this topic. And know that you can find us anytime on our website at equals.org, and we're also on social media. We look forward to connecting with all of you. And with that, I will stop talking and move on to the back to the moderator. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Therese. That was really, really good. And thank you for your work and everything the Equals Initiative is doing to make change. So from here, I'm pretty sure we're going to be moving on to the panel discussion aspect of today's event. Before we start the discussion, I wanted to lay down some ground rules and obviously make introductions of all of our panelists. So I will do that now. Okay, so in our panel, we have a total of 7 women who are speaking. Obviously, we had Therese, who just gave her a wonderful keynote, and thank you so much for speaking in terms of that. Next up, we have Emily Craven, who is the founder and CEO of the Story City GPS app, a unique storytelling app which allows participants to take part in a story set in the location they are standing. She's also a writer, speaker, and producer. Next up, we have Janine JJ Conway, who is a financial planner who empowers individuals to dump debt and build lasting wealth through financial and business education and coaching. She has served in the Air Force for over 21 years. Next up, we have Harsha Banur. She is the Director of Partner Technology at Microsoft US OCP. She has held a number of progressively responsible managerial roles at Microsoft. In her role, she works with strategists to oversee business growth amongst Microsoft's public sector partners. Next up, we have Sanjani Sengupta, who is passionate in the subject of gender empathy and emotional culture in homes, society, and workplaces. She writes columns for a number of mainstream media houses such as India Times, Huffington Post, Youth Ki Awaaz, and She the People, and others. Next up, we have Arpita Kaul, who is an assistant professor at Sri Venkateswara College, University of Delhi, and has coordinated the 11th International Conference in Slovakia in May 2010. Next up, we have Surabhi Agarwal, who is a technical social entrepreneur who wants to create an impact on people by teaching them various skills. She is currently running an organization called GirlScript Ireland, which is an extension of Indian NPO called GirlScript Foundation, and was previously the chairperson of Enactus UCD. And lastly, we have Vaishnavi Singh, who is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in commerce. She is the ambassador of Go Ladly and an NPO in the USA as a member of its Girl Advisory Board. Thank you so much to our panelists who are speaking. It is great to have you all here with us today. So before we get into the actual panel discussion aspect, like I said previously, I did want to lay down some quick ground rules that will help us keep the discussion in check and ensure that everything is productive and professional. So first of all, the duration of your speech while you're speaking in the panel should not exceed 10 minutes to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. Secondly, any derogatory remarks or comments on the members of the panel will not be entertained. Any political or insensitive remarks will also not be entertained. All participants are requested to keep themselves on mute unless it is their turn to speak. In case the speakers wish to present something, like a PowerPoint or a video, they can upload it on the drive, the link of which will be shared on the WhatsApp group. You may note that you can engage with other participants through the chat window option on the Zoom. There's also a private chat window option in case you want to speak to a specific person directly. The raise hand feature on Zoom may be used if any of the participants wish to speak. So those are our basic ground rules. That's pretty much it. Aside from that, I'm very glad to have everyone here. I'm super excited to moderate, and I think this is going to be a great panel. I guess from here, I will go straight into the questions portion of our panel discussion. So the first question that I have prepared for today is, what is meant by the gender pay gap? How is this affecting the workforce of organizations and the industry? Surabhi, could you speak on that for us?
Yes, yeah, sure. I'd love to speak on that. So currently, I am based in Ireland, in the Europe. So I just completed my internship at Intel, and I realized that the gender pay gap over here is not that prominent as compared to other places. So Europe is a bit more gentle in that way, and we have seen that both for men and women, it's equality. All my other fellow colleagues who were male, they were getting equally paid as compared to me. So there was not much of a gender pay gap as per women and males, over at least in Europe. So I don't feel that the gender pay gap is very prominent over here. All the jobs, when it comes to restaurant jobs or even jobs in technology, they pay equally to men as well as women.
Thank you, Surabhi. That's really great to hear. I know I've heard from my own research, I've heard that it's more prominent in some places than it is others. So it's interesting to see an aspect from somewhere that's not the US or India. So thank you for that. Emily, could you speak on that a little bit as well?
I suppose with the gender pay gap, I've seen a bunch of different things. So I've been a part of several different industries. So originally when I first started off my adult career, as it were, so when I first went to university, I went to university within the area of space science and astrophysics. That was my degree. And when I realized that that was not something that I enjoyed doing, I ended up going into geology. And geology, particularly in the mining fields, is something that is a very gendered area. And it became more so when I left university, which was during the global financial crisis in 2008. And so it was really starkly apparent. Even back then, they had kind of been making murmurings about female geologists not necessarily being paid as much as their male colleagues, because mining areas are full of a lot of male-dominated industries that also drove a lot of women away as well. And what a lot of the female colleagues in my degrees used to do was that they would go on to get PhDs or master's degrees as a way to kind of either avoid going into the industry or to deal with the fact that they all of a sudden didn't get, there was not as many job opportunities during the global financial crisis. And then when they came out the other end, they ended up then with a problem where they were told that they were too qualified and they didn't want to pay them enough. And so that's something that I've definitely seen a lot in there. And then when I went on to what I really wanted to do, which was storytelling, and I now run my own tech company that deals with telling stories and digital storytelling, you also see it a lot in the arts as well. So male writers end up with bigger book contracts, end up being able to recover from books that sold poorly to get new books commissioned. But the majority of the echelon of the arts is made up by female creators, and they tend to earn on average about 30% less than they did 20 years ago. And they generally will have to hold down second jobs, and they also have to they also have like family responsibilities. And so I've definitely seen that in terms of the gender pay gap, it also ends up being a career pay gap as well, because they can not produce as much content as their male counterparts. And that then further results in them ending up with smaller royalties and those kind of things. So it's as Therese probably knows very well, it's there's a whole bunch of complex factors that go into that, but I definitely see it in different areas that I've worked in how those opportunities present themselves.
Right. That's interesting. That really makes sense. So just a quick thing before I move on to the next question. I will actually be pasting the questions in the chat in case any other participants want to just openly discuss within the chat. And then also, if you would like to speak on a specific question, send me a private message. That way I can ask you if you would like to speak on that question specifically. So moving on from that question, which was very beautifully responded to, my next question is regarding, so McKinsey estimates that employing more women and decreasing pay inequity could add over $12 trillion by 2025 to the world's GDP. How could closing the gender pay gap improve the situation of the world's economy? Has there been any progress in reducing this gap that you have all seen so far? JJ, could you possibly speak on this one? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I do have a career in tech. I would like to say that I wish I could say I've seen more progress in this area than others, but unfortunately, the progress that I have seen has been borne on the shoulders of women, not only for women like my mother and her generation that really paved the way, but also those of us who are involved like we are today in these kinds of discussions. As we were getting ready to start, Ms. Sarabi was saying how she went from being in an all-girls school to being in a environment that was more co-ed and not seeing as much of a difference in the mindset. And I didn't catch the whole conversation, so I wasn't sure what the difference she was talking about, but it resonated with me because just like Ms. Littleton said in her keynote, we don't just need to change the minds of men regarding the role of women in the workplace. We have to change the minds of women. And, as a physicist in the Air Force, one of the things that I noticed is that even in the governmental structure of the United States, that we would have female physicists and male physicists working alongside each other. And those jobs are very clear. Everything in our United States bureaucratic government is fairly well defined as to what your job is and what your contribution is worth, but the women were still being paid less. And so for me, when I hear that question, I'm like, I'm thankful for the progress that allows me to be where I am today, but I definitely still acknowledge that we have a long way to go. What are some of the things that we can do about that? One of the strides that's being made is access to quality education and funding for that education. And so that's helping more women be able to compete on the global workforce field.
Right. I think it's really interesting that you pointed out how it's also like an issue of women, and that really shows how the patriarchy affects both parties. It's not just a male or female problem. It leads to a lot of internalized misogyny or internalized victimization where you think personally that you can't do something just because you're a woman, because that is a trained mindset that we have been taught. So speaking of education, Dr. Kaul, could you speak on this topic as well? I think you are.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mika. Thanks a lot. So let me just share this slide with you. The fact is that as women, if we are not given our due share, we will not really be able to contribute in the economy, be it Indian economy or the world economy. So what I'm going to address here is that how this entire gender gap impacts the business or the economy as such. If you look at the survey that was conducted by Peterson Institute for International Economics in 2016, it found that companies with at least 30% of women in senior management had a 15% higher profit. Women who are considered top performers at work are often less likely than men to receive a promotion. So glass ceiling effect is what we are referring to here, and somebody earlier also spoke about it. Despite similar experience levels, they have 21% less chance than their male colleagues to reach the first level of management. And you see, that is how it impacts the productivity level. That is how it impacts the sales level of any particular business, which in fact will actually affect the GDP also of a particular nation. So employees who feel important and fairly compensated are more satisfied. If I think that I am fairly compensated, I will obviously be a satisfied employee. Not only a satisfied employee, I'll be an involved employee. And my citizenship towards my organization, my loyalty towards my organization will also be greater. Therefore, it increases my performance. It actually increases the performance of the company, so to say, which also leads to increase in the GDP of a particular nation. So those females are more invested in their work who feel that they are being fairly compensated. A female worker who feels undervalued because of the pay gap is most likely to underperform. And since there is hardly an incentive for her to go the extra mile, it affects her productiveness. Having said that, when you mentioned that I'm from the education field, although as a female, I do not face any kind of gender pay gap in education. Why? Because somebody in the panelists rightly said that actually this gender pay gap is very, profession based, or it depends on what profession are you actually referring to. When you're talking about education, college teachers or school teachers, females are considered to be teacher material. So that is actually a stereotype that they have, which is not really fair, but then that is how it is. So they don't really have to face this gender gap or maybe this promotional issue in education sector. We get our due share as deans or teacher in charges of the universities or colleges. So we don't face that. But then in industries like IT, women do have to face this gender pay gap. But in the long run, this impact of the gender pay gap is felt in the entire productivity of the organization. And just to sum it up, it also affects the morale. So morale of females is actually affected. If I do not get paid fairly, I am affected. Not only I, my friends, that is my other female friends, will also feel that they are not getting their fair share. As a result of which, they will not be retaining the same job. They might be looking for greener pastures, and therefore an organization will have to again spend a lot of money on recruiting and selecting. And finally, the last point that I would like to make is, it does affect the branding of a particular company. Whichever company is actually having this gender gap, the greater the gender gap in a company, the lesser the branding or the goodwill or the reputation of that company will be. Thank you, Mika. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we point out how it varies from obviously profession to profession, even country to country, company to company. It's all extremely relative. Both of my grandparents are educators, and I come from a pretty long line of educators. So everything that you were saying resonated pretty well. It's things that I've heard numerous times over and over again. I also wanted to bring Harsha Vanur into this discussion. I know that she said she had some points to make on this specific question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mihika. So yes, one of the things that I wanted to point out here is, especially being in the field of technology for the last almost 24, 25 years, one of the things that I've noticed is how organizations shine a light on that, right? And so if you go back and look at what Microsoft, I work for Microsoft, and so you can go and look up the gender report. So we starting 2016, we actually started publishing a gender and diversity report. It's about transparency and shining a light on the topic, right? And so when in 2016, we have certain numbers in terms of like equity and equality of gender, but also like the pay, right? And so, we went from women getting within the US, about 99 cents for a dollar in 2016 to now we are almost at 1.001 to a dollar. And in fact, in like some ethnic minorities as well as certain categories, it's almost 1.006 to 1, right? So when an organization shines a light on this topic of equal pay and gets the data out there, we are one of the 3% of the Fortune 500 companies that actually makes their gender data available to the public, right? And so that's when you as an employee, that you're getting paid equally, right? And so that just doesn't bother you or bog you down. And so I think it's important for all corporations, not just the top ones, to not only hold themselves accountable, but also to hold their suppliers, their partners, their vendors accountable to this. And I think that's one of the ways in which we could really try and achieve gender pay equality.
Thank you so much for your input. That's really interesting. I mean, we'll often just group all companies into this one group of almost negativity when it comes to women's issues, but we should always keep in mind, there are positives. There are companies that are actually doing a lot for their women and paving way for other companies to follow by example. So yes, I think that would be it on that question. Thank you to everyone who answered. That was wonderful. Next up, I know this is going to be a big one. Paid leave for menstrual days is a very prevalent topic. So do women really need days off for that? And will there be repercussions of this on the specific organization? So I already know that this is going to be a huge topic. JJ, could you actually start us off on this one?
I'm sorry, everyone. I didn't mean to imply that I have anything to contribute on it except that I want those days.
I think all of us want those days.
But just to talk about it a little bit, we have to understand that it's not only it's not only the patriarchal society that we have to deal with, but again, going back to the mindset of women, in championing something like this, which is definitely not heard of in my spheres of work, but is that the women who, I had to struggle, I had to fight my way, I had to subsume who I am and, put myself aside for the sake of having this career and this job. And now you want to just come in and coast. So again, it's not even just changing the mind, as we'd already discussed, it's not just changing the mind of men or even making it important to the institutions, but it's also honoring the women who feel like we should have to suffer like they did.
Yes, I definitely agree. Miss Sanjini Sengupta, could you speak on this as well?
Sure, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
This fine? Yeah. So yes, this is a very interesting question, and it's interesting to see how women themselves are divided on this topic. I think, obviously, I stand and advocate for menstrual leaves and any other leaves, and I feel that we should not even try to, like say that we deserve it or something. It should be something that is celebrated. In fact, I don't know how many of you would have read a lovely essay by Gloria Steinem which says, "What if men could menstruate?" If any of you have, wonderful. Otherwise, I would really urge you to, Google it up and give it a look. I think that before we even try to debate on this point, which should be beyond debate anyway, it is our biological reality. It's simple. It's our biological reality that women are, if they don't need, they won't take it. It's fine. But we need the agency. And why we need the agency is we have to understand that the workplaces have been created by the men, for the men, of the men. It is a masculine world outside our homes. In fact, inside our homes too, as we often say, the mobile we hold in our hand is made by the palm size of a man. the elevator, the, every single thing, the computer table, the keyboard, everything is masculine by design. When we have to talk about the reality, and if we have to, kind of defy the biological reality of women to be able to prove that we are equal enough. I mean, it is not the question of equality, it is the question of equity. And I'm sure in this panel, many of you already know that difference, but let me still, give you that in words. Equality is giving everybody the same thing. So the 7-month-old and the 7-year-old and the 70-years-old get the same food. Equity is giving everybody what they need to be able to grow, nourish, flourish. And we have to understand, it is not to say that we are similar by breed, because we are not. Men cannot make a baby, we can. And this has to be celebrated. There is no qualms in, obviously this is also very political to say motherhood is unnecessarily glorified, and that too is a politics. Not every woman has to marry, not every woman has to have a child, but the fact that, we should just generally celebrate the very aspect, the very phenomenon of it. Why are we debating, from a sense of scarcity? I feel that we have to look at the feminine culture. And once we look at the feminine culture, once we look at the experience, once we look at listening to others, holding space for others, cultivating equality, cultivating a sense of empathy. And when even the office structure, if you look at the reward recognition or the motivation system, we are often pitted against each other. So, the very structure in education as well in the corporate, they kind of tell us to grow in place of anybody else. So that structure motivates a kind of, singularity, or I would say a kind of competition which is unhealthy. If we look at a team, I mean, as somebody also said, that experience is not job experience, but life experience. All of these things put together would give you a very clear answer on this small debate called menstrual leave, as well as debates on many other aspects which are women specific. I feel that standing in 21st century, if we have to defend our right to menstruate, it's sad.
I completely agree. I know a lot of the time in my own research, I've seen how just menstruation in general has been seen like as a dirty thing, more so than a thing that is celebrated. It's quite literally what makes so many women women. It gives us the right to do one of the most powerful things a woman can do, which is create another human being. So I think that it's super important that we talk about this. I wanted to call upon Emily next. I know she had some points she wanted to make on this topic.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the fact that how we structure work and work days and why things like burnout has become a really prevalent thing is because a lot of how we work and how our jobs have been structured that way by men of a past generation. And so you consider, like in the US, how it's common to only have 2 weeks of leave every year, and that like the only other time you get any sort of special leave is when like you have a child and you get a short amount of maternity leave or parental leave, and then you're expected to go immediately back to work until you're 67, and then only after then can you relax. And so like when you consider things like menstrual days, when you consider things like mental health days, when you consider things like sick leave, carers leave, having your children around you, when we look at building, and particularly as an entrepreneur myself, building a tech startup, like when I look at building a company, I look at being like, okay, the way that we have previously done work days, 9 to 5, those short holidays, etc., like they're not working and they're not making people happy. We're not on this earth to work or to work ourselves to death. We're on this earth to have a balance, and that balance comes from fulfilling work, and it also comes from family, but it also comes from living your life and having to deal with the things that you deal with. And so like as some of the other panelists said, like some people might not need menstrual days. Like I tend to find that I tend to be okay on those days. But then I have friends who whose hormones are just so out of whack that they have to use like really heavy birth control pills to not be in cramps and in agony for many, many days. And while I don't get trouble with menstrual days, I do get a lot of trouble with UTIs, which is something that is very prevalent in women and not necessarily in men. And so on those days, I just couldn't work and I would claim them as sick days. But it's still one of those things where if you look at how we have laid out work and how we have laid out what it means to work and what it means to be productive, having flexibility in the things that come up in life, in the problems that come up in life, and being able to give people the flexibility to take those days however they want, and have that flexibility to work from home if they need to, or have that flexibility to take time off when they need to. When I consider how I want to construct my company, like I look to places like Patagonia, which not only allows like a really long extended parental leave for both the father and the mother, but then they also actually have on-site childcare, and like the women in that company will regularly be breastfeeding while having meetings, and allowed to go and have lunch with their families, and so those kind of things are the things that I want to make sure that I build into my company. And like I want to be able to give jobs to women who have families and only want to work part-time. Like it's not a crime to not want to work full-time. You can want to be a C-suite executive who wants to earn the same money as their male counterparts, but only wants to work 20 hours a week. Like that. And so like when I look at that, I look at, so a lot of the women who are currently working with me, whether they're as community mentors or whether they're doing business development, a lot of those women only work part-time. And when I put in my applications for business accelerators and all of those kind of things, and they ask how many people in your company work full-time, I'm very pissy in that I will write in, I will be like, XY person works full-time, and these other 6 people are working part-time, and we are happy to support them working part-time because they are looking after their families and they want to be with their families, be with their kids when they're growing up, and they are very skilled, and we are very confident in their productivity and how well they work in this. And like, though they're working part-time, they are incredibly dedicated, and we have a team that moves well and is fast, and that is not dependent on full-time people. And so when you talk about these days, it doesn't, like, people freak out when you say menstrual, but what we mean is everything, like everything, like being able to take that time off for everything, and to realize that we're not on this earth to work, we are on this earth to live, and work is just a part of that. So that's something that I wanted to add in.
Oh no, absolutely. I 100% agree. I like, just from seeing sometimes my mom come home and just like collapse on the couch after like a long day. And all like these women in my life, all they want to do is just spend time with their families and live and relax, because again, like you said, we're not on this earth to work, we're on this earth to live. Last person's input on this question, Vaishnavi, we haven't heard from you yet, so I'd love if you could speak on this. If you are there.
Hi, Mihika. How are you? And thank you for calling me to the panel. I totally agree when it comes to women in workforce. I've been to some organizations where women are given equal opportunity to work, but at the same time we see that they are considered as not equal when it comes to giving responsibility. People believe that they will not be able to manage their household chores as well as the work responsibilities. So I think that has to be changed, that we are as capable as any other employee that is working in any organization or in any field. And I have seen some improvement when it comes to industry in India. So wage gap has improved, but I think we are way more to go and to improve the condition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that was a lot on that question, and that's great. I think that's something that was super important that we needed to discuss. Coming from that as a slightly different question, but why do you guys think that women are being given less opportunities in educational advancement and workforce development? Does having a role in the household and other personal responsibilities affect a woman's work performance? So I would actually, if you don't mind, if our keynote speaker could speak on this question. Therese, if you are available to speak on this.
Yes, I am. And in fact, I was just typing madly into the chat about this question. So instead of typing madly into the chat, I will just talk. So this is a big deal. I was just typing that, in fact, in the tech sector in particular, I'll just base this on my own experience working for tech companies. There's a go-getter culture that expects people to be available around the clock, either on call or literally in the office. In some cases, companies reward people either tangibly or intangibly for doing crazy things like sleeping under their desks. I'm basing this on personal experience. This is something that now that I'm a mom, I see that I never could have succeeded in many of my jobs. I would have never been rewarded with promotion, with pay raise, with even recognition of the hard work I was doing had I been needed to go pick up my child from school or go home. So yes, I think this is a huge issue that is systemic and needs a systemic change. Work needs to move, we need the whole world, I think, at this point, especially in the pandemic, to move to a different mental model of what work means. We have had to, in the past 6 months, we have all had to adjust our notions of what work means. And many of us, myself included, have gone to entirely remote work for managers who were very, very reluctant to let people telework before. So I would say that this could be an advantage for women if we can move it in the right direction. As we know from reading many, many articles, it can also be a terrible disadvantage for women, because now when you're schooling your children at home and you're doing all the housework, or the majority of the housework, statistics say in mixed gender couples, women still shoulder the majority of housework in the United States anyway. And you're also trying to get your work done at the same time. This could be a terrible recipe for disaster for women. However, I prefer to look at the bright side and hope that this idea of the flexible workplace, you're judged by your productivity, not the number of hours that you're in your seat at the office. You're judged by your accomplishments, not your physical presence. In other words, could be turned to women's advantage, and I hope that it will be. But those were just some of the thoughts that I had on this topic. So I'll let someone else speak now, and hope that someone has some good ideas to solve this.
Thank you so much, Therese. That was super interesting. I would next like to call upon Ms. Sanjini Sengupta to speak on this topic.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mihika. And thank you, Therese, for bringing into light a very interesting perspective. Much of what I was trying to also, bring to light, but thank you for doing half of that already. I believe that, a lot of things come in question. The big mistake we try to make, two big mistakes we try to make while talking about women at workplaces is, number one, since the problem seems to be women representation and pay at workplace, we try to solve it at the workplace. The problem is everywhere. The problem starts from road safety to the share of household work, to perception, to empathy of the boss, to safe child care, to the dependency of the child that happens because of this lopsided paternity and maternity leave and gender stereotyping of what a father can do, what a mother can do, and the expectation of everybody else in office and home and society and everywhere. You go to a party, the boys booze at one corner and everybody tells you, you are the mom, go feed the baby first and then you come back and feed yourself. So it's just every living, breathing, kicking moment. One is that. The second is, if we, the second mistake we try to make is when we attempt to fix this problem, we try to fix the woman. Women are not broken. The system is broken, but we try to fix the women. So over and above their jobs, we now put women into, echo chamber groups of women leadership trainings, women mentoring, women, etc., XYZ. We understand that there are a lot of hurdles in the way the office system works at the moment. There are a lot of perceived hurdles internal to women as much as there are external. Obviously, we talked about the external quite a lot. Unconscious bias, men are hired and promoted based on their past, based on their future prospects, and women are hired and promoted based on their past accomplishments. Women, when they tick off 10 out of 10, in the checklist for a job, they feel confident to apply, whereas men, even if they have ticked off hardly 6 of them, they are happy to raise their hand. So the difference of voice, the difference of assertion, the difference of office politics, strategic relationships, access to those, bro culture, having, taking each other by the shoulder and going for a smoke. Sponsors, mentors, people who would bang the desk behind those closed doors. How many do it for women? How many do it for men? Role models. Also the structure in which the promotion and hiring works for those few women who go through it, in a way, and it may sound a little, blasphemous to say this, but in a way, the process masculinizes them, like we are all androgynous, right? I mean, these traits are feminine, masculine. These are really like subjective matters. And at times, we also say that don't kick the ladder when you climb it, or don't take the ladder away with you. So there is a bit of, superwoman syndrome, that if I could do it, why can't you? So are the senior women leaders helping us? Is everybody else helping us? Are we helping ourselves? Assertion, negotiation part. Often we have to choose between child and career. Men have child and career just like any of themselves. We have to choose between jobs and career. At times we are so bogged down to finish the thing we have to do and come back home to a child that we forget to keep one eye towards the career graph. And when we come back home again, the experience, the perspective that we can carry from our life experience into our job, that is not appreciated or that is not recognized. So there are so many inherent, innate, and also motherhood life lessons that can come handy if we are talking about empathy as a conscious leader, but hardly any recognition system at office recognize that. And theorists give a very wonderful point about presentism. Like if you sleep on the carpet, maybe even that is rewarded. With COVID, that has gone down. So, COVID does have some good sides to it. So yeah, we have slowed down. We are stopping to smell the flower. Presentism is being dismantled. Bro culture is being dismantled a bit. So yeah, I mean, let's talk in terms of hope a little bit. But I do think that we need to look outside the office to be able to solve the problem. And we should stop trying to fix women and to stop trying to fix the system. Over to you, Mihika.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that. Next up, I have a question specifically regarding maternity leave. So how do you think, unfortunately, from my research and from what I've been told, a lot of women end up losing their jobs after maternity leave, or if they ask for an extension on their maternity leave, which is very clearly extremely unfair. How do you think we can improve the condition for those women who lose their jobs after maternity leave or because of maternity? Dr. Kaul, could you speak on this?
Yeah, the first place, I think this kind of thing should not happen. In the sense, when somebody asks for an extension of a maternity leave, or for that matter, if they ask for a maternity leave and they are not given maternity leave, I think rather than bringing them back into the workforce, I think the first thing that we need to address is that why will they or why should they leave the workforce at the first place? So this which can only be affected by a legislation, I think. Nothing else seems to be working. But I'll personally give you an example of University of Delhi, where I myself work. And in this, we have a system of ad hoc teachers, whereby these teachers are not permanent teachers, but contractual teachers. And they are not given any facility of a maternity leave. So this concept, I mean, you will be astonished to, hear that there are people who deliver a child and within maybe 11 days or even less than that, they are in the college reporting for duty. They are not given any maternity leave. If they want it, it will be, an unpaid leave, and that also maybe for a month's time. So what I'm saying is bringing them back into the workforce should not be the question. The question should be, why should they leave the workforce? They should never be asked to leave the workforce. They have that's how their body is, and they will one day get pregnant. They will need maternity leave. And therefore, by assuring that kind of an environment where you're giving them maternity leave, it gives them more loyalty towards an organization. It means the relationship between the employee and the employer gets stronger, and thus that will only increase my loyalty and commitment towards the organization. Having said that, we do have for permanent employees or for the central government employees in India, the option of not only maternity leaves. I'll, I think, share the slide also with you, if you'll just give me a minute. Just a minute. Seems to be not working. Yeah, just a minute. See, like there is definitely an opportunity whereby they are given CCL and they are granted around 2 years or 730 days of CCL. So they can actually take an entire 2 years of leave, not together. Maybe it will be better to actually, bifurcate it. That's how it works when your child is little or maybe at a later age. Especially in India, we have it during 10th exams and 12th exams when a parent want to be with the child. So they do provide it. So there are opportunities. I would not say there is no legislation at all. In India, we do have the Maternity Benefit Act also, which ensures that you get this kind, the 6 weeks maternity leave. But secondly, when your question is that how do we ensure that they get back to the workforce? See, when I am on my maternity leave, I lose on a lot because the technology is changing, and hence whatever skills I had earlier, I've actually lost that during my maternity leave. So one thing is upskilling, I think relearning, and that is what we need to address, because otherwise females cannot re-enter the scenario. So they need a lot of training, they need a lot of upskilling, they need a lot of relearning, they need a lot of unlearning. So it's just like, the leaders of tomorrow who not only unlearn, but relearn. So rather, I would say unlearn, learn, and relearn. So yes, it is a challenge for females to get back to work. Having said that, whatever their experiences, work experiences, should be calculated when they want to come back to work after maternity or maybe even after marriage. But from a female point of view, I think as a female, it is also my responsibility to work on my skills, to work on my, hone my skills, which will be important. Like within 2 days, the skills change nowadays because of the changes that are happening, So it is true for everyone, for students, Mehika, like you, for me, so I have to do online teaching now, which I was never doing. Hence, it is changing very frequently. So for them also, I think we need to stress more on upskilling and training. I think that's the key. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really informative, and I completely agree. I think what you were saying previously with loyalty to a company, it's actually been statistically proven that women tend to stay in a company longer when given proper maternity leave. It just builds that trust and shows that the employer really cares about you rather than just your labor. And also, I saw some people talking about Nordic countries in the chat. I know even like Canada gives you a year for maternity leave because that's really like bonding time with your child. I definitely think that maternity leave should be extended. Next up, I was wondering if JJ would like to speak on this topic. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted again. I would absolutely like to speak on this topic. When I first joined the Air Force over 23 years ago, you only received 2 weeks of actual maternity leave. You actually only got hello, you only receive 2 weeks of maternity leave before you could be assigned to a new transition, or 6 weeks to before you could be deployed overseas. And so that has changed over the years. And when I had the little guy that you guys see keeps trying to budge in, right after, of course it was right after I had him, right? You know, I burned all my vacation days, and then the Air Force changed it to 12 weeks off. But the Navy changed theirs to 18 months. You didn't have to take the 18 months, but it changed it to 18 months optional. And so one of the things that we saw with that was you had an increase in retention, and you also had an increase in morale. Now it took some time. It took some time for that to reverberate, because the initial perception on the part of male workers, and again, as I mentioned before, those females that they themselves suffered or made sacrifices for their career rather than the whole totality of being a woman. But once the other forces saw the success that the Navy had, then they began to extend theirs. And I think the Air Force is still at 12 weeks. I'm retiring now, so I don't know the current stat. But one of the things that really concerned me was that even in many of our United States, which likes to tout itself as being supposedly so progressive, is that the federal workers don't even get any maternity leave. And so when I look at the strategy, my hope is that our increasing reliance on digital platforms, even like this one, that will allow women to still continue to maintain their currency, as well as stay connected in their professional realms, that those things will lead to a reduction of the impact of maternity leave on a woman's ability to continue contributing to the workforce. And one thing that I really enjoyed hearing with this panel is the acceptance of the completeness of being a woman. So I have a teenager and a toddler. And when I had the teenager, my initial impression was I was going to stop working and be a stay-at-home mom for a few years so I could properly, in my opinion at the time, properly rear my child. Every woman mentor in my life at that moment was like, you can't do that. You have a physics degree and a nuclear degree, and you would be throwing away all of our hard work to help you get to where you're at and just to sit home and be mom. And at the time, so this was 15 years ago, right? At the time I thought, well, I don't understand. Like, I thought we were fighting for the right to be whoever and whatever we wanted to be. But now you're telling me I can't be mom, and I can't do these feminine things that are part of my natural makeup, because to do so is to fly in the face of all the barriers that you tore down and the glass ceilings you broke. And at that time, I ascribed to what I was being told. And now having the flexibility, having the economic freedom to be able to choose, you know what, I'm going to retire from the military and be a mom for my children and be active in the community and be active in my business and help people win with money while they're at school. That's a choice that I have the freedom to make. And too many women in our world do not have the freedom to make that choice. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for speaking. So first of all, thank you so much for your service. That's amazing. And second of all, your little one has such a privilege to have such an amazing and well-spoken mother. Now, nearing the end of my questions, I had a question saying, why do so few women work in scientific and technical or STEM fields and opt for less paid jobs in the workforce? Ms. Benora, could you please speak on that?
Yes, that's a topic that I'm extremely passionate about, given that I have 2 daughters myself. So there's 3 things, right? The first thing is the lack of role models. I think, one of the things that schools should do, like I know you said from the cradle, the hand that rocks the cradle, will that rock the boardroom? A similar analogy is, we need to carry our girls from the classroom to the boardroom, right? And so like the process of making sure that we mentor them and we show them female role models and we, get them in the field of STEM and, showing them that technology is really an enabler. I mean, this is something that I feel very passionately about, because I think there's a whole misconception that, technology is something that just, we do for, like people who are good at math, or, mostly men are coding and all that. However, like I was breaking up some statistics here, right? I mean, in the US last year, 18% of the bachelor's degrees in STEM had females, 30% of masters, and 20% of doctorates. And that has gone down in the last 5-6 years, from 27% to 18% female representation. And it's very interesting because I think one of the panelists said, in India, I remember my grandmother, she was like, oh, go ahead and do like computer science. You get to sit in an AC room. You don't have to like worry about that. And so like the perception there was, if you're female, you can just go do computer science, because that is like the career for females. Versus when I come to the Western world, which is where I have raised my children, I see that there is, there is all these cliques, right? There's like the popularity associated with it. Or if you are a woman in STEM, then, there is like a whole perception that you probably are a nerd or a geek, right? The thing is, creativity and STEM, they exist together. And, I think the other thing is, for you to be a good coder or to be a good problem solver, you need to have the creativity aspect. And that actually females have the most of. The other thing I also feel is, it's important that the classrooms are inclusive. A lot of times what's happening is, in the classroom, again, there are unconscious biases. Our educators need to be taught that, you reward females and males equally, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that, just because you have done coding, it's good. I mean, or if your code is not perfect, right? I mean, kids, girls especially, are always said like, oh, you have to be perfect, right? I mean, somehow I've noticed that, and I'm very aware of the fact that imperfection is good. And when you are coding, you start with imperfect and then you perfect it. And girls inherently are not comfortable being imperfect because of the society in which they are raised. And so I think there's a lot of factors there, right? So the first one is making sure that there is enough role models. The second thing is get them early. You can see that the earlier the children are exposed to technology as a fun way, right? I mean, and that's the other part, is we do not want to make it like, oh yeah, like go take your coding class. Both my daughters, they smile about it, and they're like, I keep telling them coding is a life skill, and it's okay. Yes, it's a life skill, but it's a life skill to solve a technology, right? You don't need to go and write like millions of lines of code. Just use it to help solve a business issue that you're trying to do, or a school issue that you're trying to do. And I think so role models, making sure that you introduce them to technology in a fun way early on. And then the third thing is making sure that our educators are taught to be inclusive, right? Because I think they tend to gravitate. I mean, this is my personal experience. I've seen educators where they just tend to gravitate to encouraging boys. I mean, when a female does something, encourage her twice as much, right? Because they are the ones who are the ones who are doubting themselves all the time. They are the ones who are going back and saying, well, maybe my code was not perfect, or maybe I was not that correct in like the way I wrote it. I mean, like I know like a child who actually, for one of the AP computer science principles courses, the project that she wrote was about the Avengers, right? And it was like a shopping cart where you could go and, buy superhero stuff. It was like the most amazing creative project, and like Black Widow spider, or like I don't know much about this, but I was like, think about how much creativity went into it, and the teacher did not encourage her. It was so sad. And I didn't say anything to the teacher at that time, but after the course I called her and I said, from one female in STEM to another female in STEM, you think that child is going to go into STEM, right? And I think that's the key, is we need to pull our own people. We need to make sure that, we tell our educators that, you need to encourage girls twice as much, right? And so I think those are the key topics that I wanted to make, right? I mean, I think it's important for us to hold ourselves accountable to get our girls into STEM. And STEM is not necessarily coding, like not at all. It is, it is designing, it is user interface, it's testing, it's business development, it's a lot of things beyond just coding. So that's it. I'll get off my horse.
No, thank you so much. This story about the girl, that was really, I guess, discouraging to see that they discouraged her instead of encouraging her to pursue what she could have been very good in. I know Surabhi wanted to speak on this as well, so I will let you go forth. And then after her, I have one more question, which I hope Emily can speak on. And I think that'll be it for the questions today. So Surabhi, thank you.
I completely agree on that base. I mean, with Harsha, because see, the thing is that people, especially girls, they always tend to go for perfection. They always want to be perfect in terms of coding, and code can never be perfect. Like you have to always improvise it, optimize it, and always, debug the errors and stuff. But the thing is that encouragement definitely changes everything, because I've seen it with Transition Year Girls over here. If you go forward with a project which is catered towards coding in a fun way, they definitely love it. They don't visualize coding with black screens with lines on it. They tend to kind of understand the whole potential which is behind technology, and Microsoft has actually come up with a great initiative to do so. So they donate microbits to schools and organizations so that microbits could be used with transition year girls or other girls in school, and we can teach them how to code using those small mini devices. And they're so interesting, they're like toys, and you can literally tell them the basic fundamentals of code through those toys. And I feel that really buzzes joy in them. They understand how they can use their creativity towards those things. And even with Girls Script Ireland over here, I've seen that we started it from scratch. Like, there was nothing here, and we started it, and we just had the brand name of Girls Script from India, and we started doing online classes, and we realized that majority of the people who were applying for it were girls. So there are girls who want to code and develop games, learn Java, Python, C++, all these languages, and they do step ahead to take that action, and they're doing so well. We had games built by them, and they did a really good job. So I feel it's just a matter of encouragement, and it's just a matter of making them realize that they can do it, and it doesn't need to be all perfect all the time. And I also feel that with encouragement, we really need to play our part when it comes to other countries, or even in Indian colleges and schools. We really need to kind of encourage our girls to step outside of their comfort zone and validate their crazy ideas so that they can really implement them. Because people used to tell me that your ideas are crazy, you will not be able to implement them. But with Girls Script Ireland, we literally reached a global scale within 2 months, and I think it's doable. So it's just a matter of telling people that your ideas are implementable and you can go a long way with them. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me to this panel.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting to hear about. So this is my last question before we open the floor to questions from any listeners. So my last question is, what does the future of work look like? What is your organization doing to ensure that everyone has access to digital skills? And what are your thoughts on, access to digital skills across, all fronts? Emily, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do. So I suppose to give people like a slightly more context. So the startup that I currently run at the moment, Mihika, did a beautiful introduction before, but essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a platform that allows anybody in the world to be able to create location-based stories. And so there's stories that are actually only accessible when you're standing in the right location and take you on a tour through those streets. And so those stories might be fictional, they might be games, they might be non-fiction. And as part of that, we have a look at when we're starting to build these things in, we're looking at, in terms of the future of work, how do we allow people to build their collaboration capacity so that they can work with other people who have different skill sets to them to make something that is bigger than themselves and bigger than the skill sets that they have. And then how do you build a way that the community can build an ever-evolving base of knowledge that actually allows people to learn from other people and to build their skill sets that way. And so when we look at the future of work, education is a big part of what we are planning to do. And we're wanting to make sure that education is freely available, that it is something that constantly evolves so that you don't get that delay in, you know, education or science or whichever from being able to keep up to date and current, and to allow that culture to then evolve and keep up to date and current. Because when you think about how, you know, the battles that we are having with equity here, like that cultural zeitgeist comes from information and from knowledge. And if the information and knowledge that is accessible to people can't mature fast enough and can't be shared fast enough, then you have this problem where you have that lag or delay in things like achieving equality or achieving gender. And so I think that for the future of the workplace, we want to make sure that this education is accessible and it's able to evolve as those ideas are changing and as like activist movements come out and all of those kind of things. And so building those education systems that are able to do that in the digital age, building ways for people to be able to collaborate across industries and across places and to give people their voices unheard, but also to allow people technologies to ease them into it, right? Like, so the way that this space kind of works at the moment, you need to understand really coding heavy things to be able to create stories in this space. And so that locks a lot of creators out of this. And so Therese was talking about the fact that like you're having these initial like ICT courses, but then like when you're getting people to be creators, you're expecting them to learn a whole bunch of incredibly complex technology, which sometimes is a really difficult thing to make people dive into. So if you can build tools that allow people to be able to tell stories as they naturally tell them, to be able to create in ways that don't require them to be technology heavy, so that when technology evolves and gets to a place where people can easily use things like augmented reality, for example, or VR, for example, you can incorporate those technologies, but you need to meet people where they're at now. And a lot of creators and a lot of women who don't have access to different technologies or the internet or whatnot, you need to be able to build bridging technologies and build bridging ideas that allow people to spread those stories and spread what they're doing in a way that, yes, uses technology, but doesn't necessarily rely on you to be that super complex, so that we can get, you know, girls learning those complexities and getting them into STEM early as much as we can. But for those that we can't, to make sure that you have those bridging technologies that still allow them to connect and not only connect people to their stories and their communities, but then also allow them to share their voices that they don't normally get to share these days because of those gatekeepers that only make sure the same voices are heard. So that's what I see the future of work, this being this evolving education, being ways that you can build bridging technologies to more complex technologies, and then using stories as a kind of a way to mix those two together. And like when you tell stories about gender equality and when you give education about gender equality, the way that we learn is through storytelling. And the more that we can bring that into the forefront, I think the more that we will see people come into technology. And when we were talking about the professionalism and how do you get more women into STEM, a lot of the time, things that stop women from going into STEM as well, like not only the mentors, but the stories that are told about what it means to be professional, right? Like if you professional means that you have to wear a suit and all of those kind of things, that turns a lot of people off, because those are the stories that are being told. And I went to South by Southwest a couple of years ago, and I met a woman in a bathroom who was wearing the most fabulous dress I've ever seen in my life. And she said to me, I am an engineer and coder for Android at Google, and I have an Instagram account called The Dressy Engineer, and you should follow me. And so she is a coder at Google who was wearing the most fabulous dresses I've ever seen, posts them on Instagram every day, and she really is an ambassador for Google and showing you that you can be professional, but you can also have a personality and you can code, right? And I think we need more stories like that people understand that professionalism doesn't necessarily mean that you have to squash that personality. And then when those kind of stories are told, I think that we will also see a change in behavior as well. So
right.
Rant ended. Apologies.
No, don't apologize. That was super. I loved it. So I guess we're nearing the end of the panel. So I did want to open the floor up to questions in case anyone who is listening in wanted to ask questions in the chat, or use the raise hand feature so I can so that you guys can ask questions to any of the panelists. Also, last thing before I'm quiet, I have a nonprofit called Ladyship, and I basically interview senior women in order to provide some sort of inspiration to younger women who are aspiring to go into leadership positions. I will put my email in the chat, but I believe basically every single one of you panelists are amazing and would be perfect for one of my podcast episodes. So if that is something you guys are interested in, I will put my email in the chat and you guys can reach out to me. But yeah, this is me officially opening the floor up to questions. So you guys can unmute and ask questions to the panelists or ask them in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, just, yeah. If we don't have any questions, we can move forward with Mahima. She can take over from here and do the closing statements.
Firstly, thank you for letting me be a part of such a high-esteemed panel, and I am more than privileged to listen to such varied opinions from people from all walks of life and all across the globe. I think the only part that I want to talk here is about, we talked a lot about in terms of how important encouragement is. My mom, when she went to pursue her PhD, right, when I was 6 months. So I stayed with my nanny since my nanny means my maternal grandmother. I stayed with her when I was 6 months old, 6 months, and till the age I was, when I turned, I think 8 or 9. That's when my mom completed her PhD and she was done with all her work, and then she started working here. So I think those 8 years for me, I think, was a sacrifice of a lot of people in that particular thing, so that my mom could actually go forward and pursue what she wanted to. So when it comes about encouragement, it also is important about how your family supports you, how your family thinks, how important your priorities are. And I think once that is there, when everyone is supportive of what we do and how we want to become as women in future and take these leadership roles, that's where it becomes important. And I'm extremely proud to say that I am a part of this panel where such amazing women are there, which also gives us young girls motivation that, hey, there are going to be challenges in front of you, but if you take inspiration from these people who have actually overcame those challenges in their personal spheres, you can do that too. So on that note, I would like to thank everyone for coming, for sharing their thoughts. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Keshav sir for their remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think firstly, a very, very relevant and honest conversation, which is the need of the hour. which probably has been always the need of the hour, and which should be our ethic probably moving forward, especially on the issues which pertains to nearly half of the world population directly, and has some massive gains for the other half uh, if they were to do the same with together, whether it's COVID recovery or economic recovery or any of those things. So I want to tell you that for us, action is a critical area which needs to emerge out of these whole dialogues, whether they are the gender dialogues or the access to education dialogues uh, that we are doing, or the inclusion dialogues. My only learning has been that sometimes while discussing these issues in depth, we are often not mindful of many other contexts where none of this can be applied. Case in point, a deeper war-trodden area in Afghanistan, for instance. Teresa and I have been chatting about it on the Zoom chat. And I did not have sensitization around it till the time I had to run from the bullets there, and I understood how that creates another issue altogether. Or while I'm doing a Zoom call there and their electricity goes off because power stations are blown out of the, and 1 week it takes for the power to return. So I have seen that the same kind of problems in Brazil, and I was mentioning it to Teresa that we all had this very nice girl, a 16-year-old Sebastiana from the Amazonian forests in Brazil through our partners. When she came on call, she was not used to the whole Zoom business and the headphones, and she went back with a headache and has not returned ever since, and would rather have a pleasant time just inside her forest with the birds and the other people there. So one of my most humbling learnings was about the diversity of this planet, of this beautiful thing we call life, and just how differently people are leading their lives. But when SDGs, which talk about no one left behind, uh, when we really need to ensure no one is left behind, we can begin from ourselves itself. So like all the dialogues, for instance, that we do, we ensure they're gender equal in terms of not just the panelists, but the moderators. That there is definitely someone moderating who is a girl or a boy or two girls, but as an organization, we always now actively, mindfully ensure that that doesn't happen. And the good thing is men are the ones in the organization who are talking about it more than the women. That we need more women on the team, or that we need more women in the panel. I have also seen as a man gains in the workspace in terms of trust, sharing, compassion, our values. Also, that as a bonus comes to an organization when more girls or women are also in there, so less ego operation happens. So I've seen swifter decision making, easier sort of dispute resolution within the teams, and so on. And I think uh, all of this was only possible for me when I started dating somebody at 5-6 years back who went into the workforce. So up until then, I was not really clear. I had a theoretical model on the problems women face at the workforce. All of a sudden, because I became a party, because I was listening to the problems that men were inflicting on women in these workplaces, is when I truly got sensitized. Other than meeting Gloria Steinem or Nivedita Menon in my own lifetime, I mean, I got more empowerment probably, or understanding from somebody I was dating who was a strong feminist in terms of just putting her perspectives and making me understand it. So I think everyone does not have that privilege of being educated, being sensitized on the right way or a more harmonized way. And more often than not, that has a toxic impact on the woman rather than the man, due to just the patriarchal society that we have. So as a call to action, for me, my usual questions that I ask to everybody, and we follow up, because a call to action can't be made in 1 second. That's a we have to work out that action before, if we truly want to do it. So, so that will be at an individual level, at a community level, at an organizational level, and at a collective level that all of us can create, not just from now, but through August till October, all of us who are working. And because we have Dr. Arpita Kaul, like for instance, who's a professor at the university, and we have a multilateral institution such as ITU being represented. And then we have Emily from Story City. Then we have young people and somebody like Hermina who's driven all of that, Simone. So regionally and in every demographic sense, we have strengths. What we didn't have previously was that shared value with which we wanted to move ahead and break these things down for good. Or we didn't have a common shared COVID context previously. So I have seen that despite what anyone says about people distancing themselves, one silver lining is that we are all together here. And I never thought that I will have the personal honor of seeing somebody from the US Air Force in my life, other than like maybe in Afghanistan or when I was there, or in the Hollywood movies. So I think like personally, this is like for me my Top Gun moment getting realized as a teenager from India who saw Top Gun, and I think that if something like so profound can be achieved in the COVID pandemic by willing people, then there's certainly a lot that can be done between all of us. And when I say us, I mean like-minded people around the world, from any gender, from non-gender, I mean someone does not even identify in any other way, or any caste, creed, color, any identity for that matter. Finally, just one remark. As somebody who has seen child abuse uh, as a boy, also like a very small incidents, big incidents, doesn't matter, but who has understood that sometimes when we say women, I hope that children, regardless of vulnerable children, regardless of their gender, are in that category. And when we look at this from a very Foucault perspective of abuse of power, I find that the nature of power is that toxic masculinity at times, because rich women also abuse servants who are very old and male. It's not something that's not unknown to us. So it is not to put the rich women being the focus being on the economic power that they have over the other person, or the social power they enjoy on the other person, or a female teacher just harassing a young child to suicide. So I'm saying that that guy may be male, female, whatever they could be. And as an educator, I've seen too many of these instances in schools. So I feel that at some places that humble recognition of reversing of these roles sometimes in workplaces will help us understand that anyone can be harassed, women even more so because of the added patriarchal substructure, like a superstructure that we have. So I am so happy that all of us managed to achieve this discussion today. And this is the exact reflection of when Hermina and Jasmine and Mihika and Mahima and Vaishnavi are the leaders of such a thing. As what I can say as tangibly what we see when women get involved, what happens in a process, right? When women panelists come, what happens in this process? So I think this very dialogue itself is an expression of an efficient, effective, professionally conducted event where men, women, boys, girls, everyone came together. But right from what questions to what agenda to what panelist is something that was done by all our team members. And I think this is where I will have just Jasmine and Hermina give the final words and just express my heartfelt gratitude, and that we will be writing you an email. One example of what we tangibly achieved out of these dialogues, for instance, is Emily runs Story City. Dias is doing the program. Now, in the last 2 weeks, Emily and I talked across Canada and India for a partnership to ensure that the stories go out and young people get training. So next week, that is actually got put into operation before the dialogue even happened today. Emily's first public engagement. So Emily came in from Story City, but I think she's already a program partner while she sits here. And similarly, like Simone has been our supporter, and Jo, I remember, was in the first dialogue and had given her committed her extensive support. She hasn't talked today, but I see her, in the list of participants today. Jo was also on the panel, and just my final thing about that sense of respect starts with quieting our own ego, cross gender, cross roles, cross identities, and empathy added to that is just the icing on the cake, which helps us realize the interconnectedness. uh, and I was talking to Piera, again, another gem introduced by Hermina, who told me that oxytocin release in the female body at the time of birth, the same oxytocin when is released in men are the ones that enable men to feel interconnectedness or a sense of shared community. So this is something that I read as a follow-up of finding out this beautiful role of oxytocin. So just echoing the sentiments of all the speakers who said that women do have the unique gift of giving life. And it is not about equality so much for me, so much as the society missing out on such a critical treasure, wisdom, feelings, compassion, the lack of which has led us to COVID pandemic's impact of a world which is driven by men, policies driven by men. So thank you. And to one woman who breaks these barriers, who believes in breaking them hard, Hermina, again, right back at you at New York and New Jersey. So please conclude the dialogues with your final remarks, and Jasmine. Thank you.
Before I say anything, I wanted to give the chance to all of the panelists in case they had some closing thoughts and remarks and what actions they think that they can take themselves individually to continue to advocate for better working conditions for women in the workforce. And I'll start with Therese.
Okay, first, thanks so much to everyone on this discussion. It's been incredibly inspiring, and I've learned a lot, and I've been taking some notes. And if anyone needs to contact me afterward, please do. I'm at therese.littleton@itu.int, or you can just contact us through Equals or any of our social media channels. So in terms of what I'll do is, I'll continue to try to get the word out about all the issues that you brought up today, and try to, whenever possible, bring these things up in conversation with people. I do believe that talking about things rather than hiding them away and worrying about them is the way to make change at the individual level. And then, of course, our organization Equals, this is our purpose for being. We try to organize, and we're growing every day. People are wanting to join the organization, which I believe is a positive sign. Big organizations, governments, and people with money, which is, of course, what we need to implement these projects at a practical level. In terms of access, skills, and leadership, we're making more progress every day, and I hope that we continue doing so. Making connections and facilitating connections across our partnership is what we do at the Secretariat. And so that, I feel, is an important thing for me to personally remember and refocus on, is finding those intersectional opportunities for projects and for change. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Therese. Harsha, last words, thoughts, actions that you can individually take with personally and within your own organization to advance the situation of women in the workforce. Okay, so I'll just, in the notion of time, I'll just move on to JJ.
Hello. Again, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to have been on with the panelists today. I came thinking that I was going to be a blessing to all of you, but you all have absolutely blessed me, and you have expanded my awareness of what is needed to be done. And so one of the commitments that I'm going to make to you all today is that I'm going to add many of your concerns to my existing platform, encouraging women to succeed in STEM. And I am going to highlight as many of your events as I can, because I think it's important for us all to work together. And I think that if you do your lane and I do my lane and we all cooperate together, we are going to move the needle on the lives of women worldwide. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, JJ. And Emily?
I think for me, what I am planning to do forward is two things. One of them is to be very conscious about how I build my policies so that they don't affect women. And I think that I am going to be visiting the Equal website a lot to make sure that that is going to be, that I'm considering all of the different aspects, because today I was like, yes, I need to make sure that I remember doing that as well. But also the other thing is to continue with working with people like the DS and with the Aspire Artemis Foundation to continue to make sure that we train as many people in how to allow their communities to tell their stories, because I think that movement is going to come from the communities themselves, and not from me as the person who is running a company. So those are the two things that I want to make sure I do.
Thanks so much, Emily. And Harsha, closing thoughts on how actions that you can take individually and within your company to continue to advocate for better working conditions for women in the workforce.
Yes, thank you so much. I think the two things that I intend to do this year is allyship, right? So just make sure that I'm available and empowering women. And then the second thing is I'm looking forward to working very closely with the Aspire Artemis Foundation, as well as your sister organizations on the digital literacy initiative that we're launching globally. So I'll definitely make Microsoft a big part of that. So excited to do that.
Thank you so much, Harsha, for that. I'll move on to Sinjini.
Thank you, Hermina. And it was truly lovely and quite a blessing, just as you said, to be here on this panel. So I'm taking away a lot with me today. I am building my organization, The Lighthouse, which is focusing on storytelling, change making, and thought leadership. And I feel that the future belongs to the stories. Emily, yeah, a virtual high five to you for doing that too. I do believe that, we have obviously as a race traveled a long way. And right now we are almost sitting, we are not realizing it as much because the change isn't physical, but we are actually sitting in the middle of a historic moment. We are actually sitting in the moment of a significant step of evolution in the human race, if I may say so. It is pretty big, more than what we are perceiving. So, from the agricultural to the industrial, through the knowledge age, we are perhaps knocking the door of the age of wisdom. And with the COVID situation, with a global lockdown, who ever thought of it? I think we are in the middle of some very significant changes, and stories are going to be the way forward. Ideas are going to be the new currency. And I am also, very recently, last week, I got appointed as the National President of Mentoring and Soft Skill of Women Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries. So I'm going to interface with a lot of government organizations, institutes, schools, business schools, community leaders, and a lot of work there. So I would love to cross-pollinate ideas and look at each one of you. So feel free to knock me up on LinkedIn by my name, the same spelling here. We can do some wonderful ideas together. I do feel that the world belongs to collaboration from now on. We are kind of a little tired from the rat race, and when the intentions are together, we can be greater than the sum of our parts. So over to a world of the feminine. I think the future belongs to the feminine. So just wanted to put a shout out to all these wonderful females out here.
Thank you so much for that. And JJ?
Hello again. I want to echo that last sentence, the future belongs to the family. The work that we're all doing will allow women to be able to have the choice to use their talents successfully in the workplace, as well as be able to be that force of change for their family.
Thank you so much, JJ. Dr. Kaul, I hope I pronounced that right, and please correct me if I.
Perfect. That's perfect. So I guess I have the opportunity, since I am an educator and a trainer, I have the opportunity of, touching many lives. So I get in touch with thousands of students, every year. And therefore, I am in direct touch with them. I'm able to, inspire them. I'm able to shape their minds. And I would like to, in fact, raise a point here that as I am a trainer, I do train on technology changes that are happening in terms of online teaching and online learning. That's my area. So for females, they are, free to contact me in case of any programs they want to hold. I've been holding it for universities across India. On Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, YouTube lectures, and many online video lectures, how to change your pedagogy from physical classrooms to virtual classrooms. So I think, like I said, everyone needs to learn, and that's what I am doing, and that's how I'm helping others to do the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And Surabhi?
Yeah, I personally think that holding these virtual classes, just like Arpita said, that we should promote online learning. So just with Girls Script Island, that's what we are trying to do as well. So I love to share other people's stories on our platform, other women, other empowering people who have established a level in their lives in which they are really happy and fulfilled, and they act as role models for our audience. And I would also love to feature all the amazing women in this panel so that they could share their amazing stories. And I get so many messages and positive response from our audience who feel really, really motivated and inspired by looking at these amazing women and what they have achieved in their lives. And especially I would like to give kudos to all women because they have been able to manage both the feminine side of themselves as well as their masculine side of themselves, of achieving and reaching their dream roles and jobs, as well as nurturing the family and giving them whatever they need. So that is really really inspiring, and I feel really inspired and motivated after this panel. So thank you so much for calling me here, and thank you so much. I love to be in touch.
Thank you so much for all of that and for all of your wonderful contribution. I think that I really like that you pointed out that we as human beings have both a feminine and masculine quality, and so we need to strive to find balance within that. So I'd like to also point out that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought to the forefront contributions of women as well as challenges they face in their work and home life. So we find that women actually handle quite a lot of work in the household in terms of finance, food security, management, organization, crisis communication, negotiation, etc. So raising children and maintaining the household is no easy feat, and women's contributions in this manner, it remains unrecognized. So let's just all move to a more human-centered approach. Let's be considerate of the situations that women and girls face globally, even being cognizant of our own personal biases based on where we stand, and recognizing that women in developing countries may also face added challenges as well. And let's just seek to be inclusive and drive for action and results, and not just in theory and in talking, but also in practice, and demand that actions are taken. So let's just also continue to take collective action. And I'd like to just hand it off to Jasmine, who has been patient throughout this whole entire process. You are fabulous, and thanks to all of you. Jasmine, please close us off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I remember my 12 years of experience in the development sector, and of all the projects that I had undertaken, only one organization, of all the organizations I worked, only one organization had a clear-cut gender policy, which they would give an orientation to all the employees who joined in, be it a man or be it a woman. And the best part about is when I tried to inquire who made those gender policies, they said it's the president. The president was a man whose wife was heading the gender division of the program. And he said, seeing my wife, I realized that it's not easy being a woman. And that is why I thought of making policies which would ensure that women are welcome always in this institution. You come back after a menstrual cycle break, or you come back after a maternity break, no one's going to judge you. You'll be treated at par what you were. So those words really came to my mind when I was listening to all the panelists today, and it has been a wonderful session. So big thanks to all the speakers here who have made this session very informative and helped us to learn a lot and take forward our learnings to ensure that the change begins from us. If we feel that there is something that we're encountering which is not right and needs to be changed, to be vocal about it, to express our concerns. And as we say in the development process, be better halves for each other and not bitter halves. So that is something I would really like to thank the panelists for. I really want to express my thanks for all the participants who have joined from across the places. And I could see some wonderful names over here. Some people who have again joined from Nigeria, who came in between their breaks to ensure that we hear, even if the last few minutes of the session can be there. And a big thanks to, of course, Harmeena and Keshav, who has always been there to support and guide. You have been like this constant beacon who's there to help us out when we get lost. And no words would be less for all the regional partners, especially Vaishnavi and Mahima, who have been there helping us every moment. I know, especially I look forward to their help all the time in preparing for the next dialogues. So thank you, a big thanks to everyone for being here. And we really look forward to another round of interesting discussion, which is on 14th of September on the issue of abuse against women. So looking forward to everyone here. And Simone is also here. We love her smile, which is the radiant smile she always comes forward with and motivates us. So everyone here, a big thank you to all.
Yeah, everyone's leaving and you can leave the call as per your convenience. But if Joe and Simone are here, can I just like say hello to them? And Simone, can you just say hello to us? To me, at least, on the call, if you're listening. If you're trying to speak, you're on mute right now, Simone. Simone and Joe, if we can say hello to you also, if you're listening. Yeah, and I know that you guys are not speaking today on the panels, but just to convey our love and respect for you as our elders, as our seniors who've always been with us, just saying a hello to both of you. Yeah, okay. So see you guys then. Now, Jasmine, when is the next dialogue for gender?
14th of September on the issue of abuse against women.
On the issue of abuse against women. So those
Yes.
of you who are interested to join in, we will be emailing you. And thanks a lot once again. And thank you to your families for allowing you time away on the Zoom call with us, not holding you any further. Those in America have a great day ahead, especially JJ and Simone, Harmeena, whoever is here from those time zones. And Denise, have a great day ahead in your time zone, I would say, and those of you in India. I hope you guys have a good dinner and we reflect on all the learnings that we have had today from the dialogues. Thank you. Thank you once again to all the team, regional partners. A big thank you to Aspire always. Bye. Bye, Joe.